What if the fastest team on the F1 track were gaining their speed from something hidden from the naked eye? Let's rewind 5 years. It's February 2020 and Formula 1's pre-season testing is coming to a close. Ferrari had been suspected of tampering with their engine components for multiple seasons, providing a top speed advantage that the other teams could not match. The final hour of testing session had begun when F1's governing body, the FIA, announced a deal that stunned the sport. So how did F1's fastest team on the straights allegedly use a secret device to gain crucial advantage on their rivals? To understand the story, we need to go back to 2018, where suspicions first began to surface. During the 2018 season, the rivalry between Mercedes and Ferrari was nearing its peak. In 2017, Sebastian Vettel had been Lewis Hamilton's closest challenger in the Drivers' Championship, while Ferrari had finished second behind Mercedes in the Constructors' standings. They were desperate to beat the Silver Arrows to a title, and to finally win their first championship since 2007. Now, back to the engine. Suspicions were first privately raised with the FIA by the Mercedes technical director James Allison at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, the fourth race of 2018. It all started when an ex-Ferrari engineer, now with Mercedes, hinted at potential irregularities with Ferrari's power unit. What were Mercedes' specific allegations surrounding the battery? Well, they believed that Ferrari had been using a second battery next to the original battery to add more electrical power. This became known as a twin battery system. Mercedes felt that the twin battery allowed Ferrari to have illegal amounts of electrical power, improving their acceleration and helping them gain a critical edge when exiting corners. In response to Mercedes' claims, the FIA fitted an extra sensor to Ferrari's second battery during the second half of the 2018 season to ensure that there was no wrongdoing. The FIA was satisfied with the sensor's results, and Ferrari was cleared of any suspicions after the Monaco Grand Prix, the fifth race of the season. Charlie Whiting was the FIA's highly respected race director at the time, having held the role over 20 years. He discussed the FIA's investigation into Ferrari following the allegations. "Some things in the data we could not quite explain," he said. "We went through it with Ferrari and they gave explanations which were not particularly convincing. We wanted to really get to the bottom of it, and in Spain, they took some measures to make sure we understood it more and that we were seeing things that we were happy with." Despite Whiting's assertions, the question kept coming back to Ferrari, with its rivals unconvinced. By the Japanese Grand Prix in October, Mercedes' outstanding form since the summer break had enabled them to streak clear in both championships, with Ferrari's form simultaneously tailing off and the rumors that the FIA's data-gathering sensors were still on the car. The then Ferrari team principal Maurizio Arrivabene was asked by Sky Italia if the extra sensor on the battery was the cause. "Our battery layout is quite complex," said Arrivabene. "So we agreed with the request from FIA to work with them. We had the second sensor, but it does not change in any case the performance of our car." Meanwhile, the team's technical director, Matteo Binotto, told the media at Monza that the case of the engine was completely closed and there was no performance gain. It seemed Ferrari just had a different battery setup. So Ferrari had shown FIA that they were complying with the regulations, and even after some concerns from the governing body, they were found to have a legal engine. That's where the story ends, right? Well, no. The twin battery system was legal, and Ferrari continued to develop their power unit, but the seeds were sown. The other teams were convinced that something in the Ferrari engine were amiss. They continued their investigations into the 2019 season. The other teams felt that the battery saga had never been properly resolved, and so still harbored worries over the legality of the Ferrari's engine. In 2019, the prancing horse continued to have a huge straight line speed advantage over other teams. We'll fast forward to August of that year, when Charles Leclerc took his first ever win at Spa-Francorchamps. Ferrari dominated on track where power is crucial. This was not an unexpected, given their well-known power advantage. The Monegasque driver took pole by 7/10 over teammate Sebastian Vettel and Hamilton, before defeating the 7-time champion on a weekend overshadowed by the tragic death of F2 driver Antoine Hubert. A week later at Monza, Leclerc dramatically won from pole again, having fought both Hamilton and Mercedes teammate Valtteri Bottas for the victory. But This victory had raised suspicions. With a 7/10 qualifying advantage at Spa, Ferrari's rivals expected Leclerc's advantage to grow even higher at Monza, which is famously even more engine-intensive track than Spa. However, his pole came by just 1/10 of a second. After Monza, Ferrari's rivals knew that their advantage was in acceleration. They had the data to prove it. Mercedes and Ferrari rounded the medium-speed parabolica at almost identical speeds, but by the time both cars reached their top speed, Ferrari had an advantage over 10 km per hour. Leclerc was uncatchable in the lead. Even with DRS and Leclerc's slipstream, Mercedes could not get close. The rest of the paddock worked out why Ferrari's advantage was much smaller. They had less opportunities to accelerate at Monza, with 11 corners compared to 19 at Spa. However, they were using their advantage in the right places, enabling them to keep the lead of the race. So where in the car was Ferrari's advantage? The other teams centered their suspicions on Ferrari's fuel flow meter. To go deeper into this issue, let's dive into the regulations. Teams are allowed to use up to 110 kilograms of fuel in a race. This was the case in 2019 too. However, the teams don't often use the full 110 kilo allowance, as this would cause the car to be too heavy, losing them time and tire performance. Next, what is a fuel flow meter? The fuel flow meter measures exactly how much fuel is running into the engine, allowing FIA to check the teams that are not overpowering the car and gaining an advantage. The teams are allowed to pump in fuel at a maximum rate of 100 kilograms per hour. So what were the allegations? Ferrari's rivals felt that Scuderia were interfering with the fuel flow meter, meaning that it would display a lower readings than the actual fuel numbers, theoretically allowing the team to pump in more fuel than was allowed. On this basis, Red Bull made a query to FIA between the Japanese and the Mexican Grand Prix in October 2019. They asked if it would be legal for teams to meet the fuel flow regulations at the specific measuring points, while still providing extra fuel flow, therefore a faster car outside of those points. This showed Red Bull's specific concerns. They felt that Ferrari were increasing fuel flow to give them huge power advantages, while hiding the fuel flow at measuring points to escape the FIA's attention. They were also careful to not exceed 110 kg limit of fuel usage. After 11 days, the FIA responded at the US Grand Prix in Austin. They made clear that this theoretical ploy would not be legal and announced that there would be pre-race checks to ensure that the teams were not lying about their overall fuel loads. There was no official investigation into Ferrari at this time, but the team suffered from a clear drop in performance in these last 3 rounds. At Austin, the other teams noticed a drop in Ferrari's straight line speed. That's what happens when you stop cheating, of course, said Max Verstappen. Ferrari claimed that with the championship gone by this point, they were running tests on how to gain more downforce and so lost its straight line speed. Their rivals were skeptical to say the least, and their performance remained under the microscope. In the final 3 races after issuing the technical directive, Ferrari only finished on the podium once, when Leclerc finished 3rd in Abu Dhabi, 9/10 clear of 4th place Bottas. But even this podium was not without its own questions. Before the race, FIA randomly selected Leclerc's Ferrari to check its fuel load matched what Ferrari had told them. They found a sizable discrepancy of 4.8 kilograms between the load Ferrari had declared and its actual measurements. This matched the suspicions of Ferrari's rivals. If a team was trying to illegally increase the fuel flow, it would need to use more fuel than usual to finish the race. But Ferrari didn't want to go over the 110 kilo limit, which would risk a harsher sanction. In Abu Dhabi, both Ferrari readings were below 110 kilograms, with their declared total of 4.88 kilo lower than the actual measurements. Ferrari's rivals felt this proved their theory. They felt that the only reason that a team would have such large gap between their declared and actual fuel loads would be to break the fuel flow regulations. Ferrari were only fined €50,000 for the rule breach and kept their podium, but the suspicions remained, even after FIA's technical directives. After the end of the season, another technical directive was issued in relation to Ferrari's engine. FIA announced that an extra fuel flow sensor would be placed on each car for the 2020 season. The final twist in this tale came in February 2020. During the closing moments of the preseason testing, the FIA announced that it had reached a settlement with Ferrari after examining its power unit. The statement read, "After thorough technical investigations, the FIA had concluded its analysis of the operation of the Scuderia Ferrari Formula 1 power unit and reached a settlement with the team. The specifics of the agreement will remain between the parties." The FIA and Scuderia Ferrari have agreed a number of technical commitments that will improve the monitoring of all Formula 1 power units for the forthcoming championship, as well as assist the FIA in other regulatory duties in Formula 1 and in its research activities on carbon emissions and sustainable fuels. The settlement shook F1 to its core. One of the most successful teams had agreed to help FIA to understand how to police the engine rules more effectively, with the governing body agreeing not to penalize the team in return. Crucially, the actual details of the agreement were kept under wraps, infuriating Ferrari's rivals. The 7 non-Ferrari powered teams signed 2 letters to FIA. Firstly, they were publicly announced that they were surprised and shocked by the agreement, stating that they strongly object to the confidentiality of the agreement. They even threatened to take legal action. When they wrote to FIA directly and confidentially, reportedly asking questions about why the FIA was unable to prove whether Ferrari broke the rules, why the settlement was confidential, whether the 2019 championship order should be questioned, what's the FIA's failure to find a definitive public solution, said about their wider abilities as a governing body. In response, the FIA issued a further statement. FIA was not fully satisfied, but decided that further action would not necessarily result in a conclusive case, due to the complexity of the matter and the material possibility to provide the unequivocal evidence of a breach. In simple terms, although it held its suspicions, it did not think it could prove Ferrari's wrongdoing. The FIA also stated that it wanted to avoid a long litigation, so it came to a dissuasive statement with the team, again hinting at Ferrari's assistance with enforcing power unit rules. A couple of weeks after the announcement of the settlement, the COVID-19 pandemic was declared. The F1 paddock's focus shifted to producing hospital ventilators and other life-saving equipment, while the Ferrari engine saga faded into the background. Meanwhile, the FIA had questions to answer. Teams first had concerns in 2018, and the matter was never properly resolved despite a settlement with 2 seasons later. For Ferrari themselves, it is hard to ignore the torrid 2020 they had endured after the settlement. The 2020 car was an evolution of the 2019 concept, and was so based on high straight line speeds, with Ferrari focusing on adding more downforce, which should increase cornering speeds. With FIA neutering the car's power advantage through technical directives, the new car had too much downforce, making it too slow on the straights. Charles Leclerc was 9/10 slower in qualifying at Austria, the opening round, than at the same track in 2019. Ferrari did not return to race-winning form until the new regulations were introduced in 2022.